is really melody concepts for lyric writers. So I know some of you are more lyric writers than you are musicians, and I think that's completely awesome, and it's uh, very cool to be able to write lyrics because a lot of musicians will say that lyrics are one of the hardest parts. But when you write lyrics, I think sometimes we forget the importance of how they interact with melody. So, as lyric writers, I think we can become better songwriters by thinking about a few key concepts. And how many of you are familiar with Tin Pan Alley, the Brill Building, kind of the legacy of the craft of songwriting? In a lot of those, the Brill Building, Tin Pan Alley, a lot of times you had lyricists and you had composers. So you had people that were working in teams. So a lot of times the lyricist would hand the composer their idea, and that's kind of where the hook may start. They might start with a title, they might start with a verse, and then the composer goes to work. Well, one of the things to think about with that is not all words make a good melody, and not all structure works really well for the composer. And as a lyricist, you have a lot of control over how your words are set to music. And I think it's important to understand the concepts in order to not only write stronger lyrics, but write lyrics that fit to music in a better way. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. So I am going to share my screen if my thing is set up right here. Always fun to get Zoom going in the morning. All right, so we'll do this. So I did want to let you know I am recording this. So this will be posted in the online community, and I might post it on YouTube as well. We'll see about that, but for sure in the online community. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or use the raise hand function, and I'll try to answer questions if you have them. Also, if you find value in this workshop, it's completely free, so no obligation. Excuse me, but if you would feel obliged, I do take tips. So you can go to buymeacoffee.com/at-home songwriting. So that way, if you feel like there's value, you can do that. So appreciated, but not something that's needed. So what are we going to do today? So the first thing to think about is our agenda. So what are we going to do? So we're going to talk about what really is melody and how does melody connect with your lyrics? And also, how do you improve your melodies if you write lyrics first? And kind of on the flip side is how do you improve your lyrics so they fit with melody better? And why is melody so important? And then we'll talk about any questions or things that you have. So, what is melody? So when we think about melody from a songwriting perspective, what we're really talking about is the vocal melody, or for our cases today, we're talking about the vocal melody or what the singer is singing. So I know instruments can be playing melodies, there can be other parts of songs that are melodic, but what we're really talking about today is what is that vocal melody? What is the singer singing? And a melody is just a series of pitches that are sung or played in rhythm. So again, melody is a series of pitches that are sung or played in rhythm. So really rhythm plus pitch equals melody. So that's really what we're talking about. And one of the key things to remember is within melody, rhythm is a lot of times more important than the pitches, because the pitches are just the notes. Where the magic happens is in that rhythm. So how then does melody connect to your lyrics? Well, the lyrical rhythm is the melodic rhythm. So whatever rhythm your lyrics are doing, that becomes the melodic rhythm. And some of you will say you can set the same line a number of different ways. And that's true. But in order to maintain sort of that natural shape so people can understand what you're saying, there's still a rhythm that may have different note lengths. It may fall in different places of a measure. It may do different things. But for the most part, your lyric rhythm is the melodic rhythm. And the melodic rhythm then is the lyric rhythm. So it kind of, you can't escape it. They're really not separated. So I think sometimes as writers, we write something and we think, well, somebody can just, either yourself or somebody else, they can just fit it to music and make it turn into a good song. But that's not always the case. So within lyrics and rhythm, the rhythm of the lyric comes from the syllables. So words are created through syllable rhythm patterns. And those patterns come from a pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. So when we speak and our language, it has a series of rhythm and a series of melody, and that's how we understand each other. So that's why we can talk in sentences and we can understand what we're saying because of that syllabic pattern. So we learn the language through rhythm, and then that rhythm pertains to the songs themselves. So I think this is a key point, is to understand that the rhythm of the lyric really sets what happens melodically. And there's really kind of no escaping that. And you can't really force any line into any melody. So I think that's key. So any questions on this part so far? So Paul explains why you can't really put poetry to music. So 100%. So that's the difference between poetry and lyric. So poetry is meant to be experienced in a different way. Lyric is specifically written to be set to melody. So poetry, you know, they're not completely different, right? Some could say lyrics are poetry, but it doesn't always go the other way. Poetry doesn't always work as a lyric. Jeanette says lyrics are more fluid, so it works. And that fluid part really means lyric has meter. And another word for meter is rhythm. So that's kind of where we kind of think that way. So when you're writing lyrics, your rhythm is about as important as what you are saying. So that's something that I don't think a lot of lyric writers think about, is they're just thinking uh uh they're really just thinking, I'm going to say what I want to say, I'm going to put it and maybe make it rhyme, and then somebody else needs to figure out how to put it to music. Well, there's 100% chance that they're probably going to have to change what you've written because it doesn't structurally work from a musical perspective. So when I say that the rhythm is about as important as what you're saying, is I want you to all start thinking about rhythm when you're writing and structure when you're writing. And I'll show you some examples after we kind of set this foundation. But here is where I said lyrics are different from poetry. They're written specifically to be set to a melody. So if you have an irregular rhythm in your lyric, you won't be able to have a refined melody. So what I mean by that is, if none of your lines have any sort of regular pattern or regular rhythm, it will never fit to a refined melody. And I think this is where a lot of writers, they write a song and then they can't figure out why verse 1 doesn't sing the same way as verse 2, right? Raise your hand if you've written a song and you're counting syllables, right? Like these lines have the same number of syllables, but why don't they sing the same? Well, it's not about the total number of syllables, it's about that stress pattern. It's about the rhythm of the line. So if the lines have the same number of syllables, that's great, but they don't necessarily have the same rhythm, and that's why they don't sing the same. So when we write lyrics first, and this is putting me into the same boat because I have to consciously think about what I'm telling all of you, because when I write lyrics first, sometimes I like to get a draft where it's only just here's what I want to say, here's the rough draft, but then it's time to go back and think about how do I actually put this into a form? How do I put this into song form so it can be more easily? Setting lyrics to music is not easy. So don't feel bad if you struggle with it, because it's hard, and that's the magic in the craft that we do. But when we write lyrics first, a lot of times we aren't thinking about that rhythm. Raise your hand if you are relating to what I'm saying right now, that you're not necessarily thinking about how is this flowing, how does this fit. Also, when we don't think of rhythm, it really makes our songs less effective because we can't have a solid melody because we're kind of wandering all over the place. Also, we really should pay attention to the rhythmic patterns because it will almost instantly start to improve your songwriting, whether you're setting your own lyrics to melody or if you're having someone or some of you I know use AI, having something do it for you as well. So let's look at a verse that I wrote. So this is an example of just writing something that came out. It feels like it's a lyric, but here's what I wrote. Flowers dry in the autumn sun. The day keeps getting shorter. My heart is breaking into pieces. Pain breathes over and over. So that sounds like there's rhythm there, right? Because there's rhythm no matter what. So I'll read it again. So flowers dry in the autumn sun. The day keeps getting shorter. My heart is breaking into pieces. Pain breathes over and over. So it doesn't feel bad, right? Like that feels like a lyric. It's not a very strong lyric necessarily, but that seems like, well, why wouldn't that fit really well with music? So Marquita says the stress pattern to her is off. So if you look at the syllable patterns for what I wrote, this has flowers dry in the autumn sun. The day keeps getting shorter. My heart is breaking into pieces. Pain breathes over and over. So notice every line has the same number of stressed syllables. So you have the same number of words that are stressed with the dumbs, right? But notice not a single line has the same rhythm pattern. Every single line is different. Melanie says she would lose some of the articles and the pronouns. So that's one way that you could possibly make it work a little bit better, but that still doesn't fix the rhythm. So notice if we look at this, when I take out the words, notice how there's no pattern, right? There's no repeated pattern within what was written. So they're all different. So that means every single one of these lines would have to have a different melody. Now, could you make this work and have every line have a different melody? 100%. That's not wrong. But what effect does that have? So if you have a song that's about everything's great, I'm so in love with you. Everything is just perfect. Nothing is going wrong. This structure is way more unstable than that because we're not getting rhythmic repetition. So the listener's not getting any sort of resolution. They're not getting any sort of feeling that things are okay. So you're going to have some prosodic dissonance, which means the prosody is going to be the prosody of the piece, the structure is not going to be supporting the emotion of what you're trying to say. So I'm trying to read the chat here. I see that there's some comments. So Susan says, I'd pick the line that felt best and work around them to start. Yes, that's what we're going to talk about here in a moment. Marquita says it can be confusing to the listener. Ron said, could you not correct the rhythm by inserting rests in the appropriate positions? So the answer to that, Ron, is not really, because the rests are still not changing the shape of what you're saying, right? You're just drawing it out at that point. So the rhythm is still different. So adding rests doesn't necessarily change the rhythm. So if we look at a lot of hit songs, and when we're talking about hit songs, we're talking about songs that connect with a lot of people. One of the things that we tend to see is that lines that rhyme will have the same rhythm. So I'll say that again. So a lot of times the lines that rhyme will have the same rhythm. So think of the song Fire and Rain by James Taylor. You know, just yesterday morning, that's line 1. They let me know you were gone. Line 2. Suzanne, the plans they made put an end to you. That's line 3. I woke up this morning and I wrote down this song. I just can't remember who to send it to. So that's a 6-line verse that goes A, B, C, A, B, C. And the rhyme scheme is A, B, C. But if you listen to the melody of that song, da 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 da, and then that repeats, right? So each line that rhymed ABC, each letter corresponds to also a matching rhythm. So if we were going to change our section to ABAB or XAXA, same thing, you would then change the rhythm of the lines to fit the rhyme scheme. So if we took my original and then we used the shape of line 1 as our A, and then line 2 is our B, we could repeat that rhythmic pattern for the next 2 lines. So that's similar to what Susan is saying, is usually your first couple of lines are what are going to set your motif, your rhythmic motif, or your rhythm pattern. And then you can decide how you repeat those. Do you do it A, B, A, B? Maybe you do A, A, B, B. Maybe you do A, B, B, A. But think about rhythm structure in the same way that you think about rhyme scheme. And in many hit songs, that's the same thing. So any questions on that? I see people's faces. I see people thinking, how is this landing with you? Susan gives a thumbs up. Paul thumbs up too. Awesome. So that's so that's what I want you to do, is when you leave here today, is start paying attention to the structure of the rhythm of songs that you like, because I think you will see that there's more simplicity to how they're structured, but that simplicity does not mean simple. right? So simple doesn't mean bad. It and one of the things to think about is your listener likes familiarity. And if you keep giving them new things over and over again in the structure, they can't pay attention to what you're saying. So if you want your listener to pay more attention to your words, you have a more structured structure of the song or more structured song form. That's why the verse, chorus, bridge, chorus structure works so well in songs. And that's why a lot of songwriters don't mess with song form, is because when you mess with song form, you're messing with your listener's ability to experience the song. So the creativity should be coming from the content, not the song form. So we're not redesigning a frame, we're just doing new paintings, if that makes sense. Paul, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm not quite getting the dum da dum da da dum in the context of the song that you had. Um, I kind of get it, but there's you have more dums in there than I do.
So,
You, could you show the lyric? Yeah, okay, the lyric, and
yep.
yeah, sing that or say that to me how it would work.
So you look at words that get stresses, if they're a one syllable word, so if they are a single syllable, words that get stresses are verbs, nouns, adjectives, and adverbs. If a word is an article, a preposition, a conjunction, those do not get stresses. So if you look at flowers dry in the autumn sun, it's dum da dum, da da dum da dum. So the
Uh,
natural stress of how the language works.
okay,
So it's flowers dry in the autumn sun.
I get it. So you're saying verbs, nouns, adjectives, and what was the other one?
Uh,
Okay, that's right.
so nouns, verbs, adverbs, and adjectives.
Adverbs. That was the one I missed. Oh,
And
okay,
then words
that
that
makes
don't
sense.
get stresses are
Hmm.
usually pronouns, articles, conjunctions, and prepositions if
Hmm.
they're single syllable.
Yeah, I was going by the rhythm of it. Um, Flowers dry in the autumn sun. The day keeps getting shorter. My heart is breaking. That's what confused me. But thanks. That makes more sense.
Yeah. Marquita,
Mm.
what's your question?
I and I don't know if this is right, but the way I did it is more familiar to me. It's like the first line that flowers has two syllables, and then compare that to two syllables, like line per line each syllable. Would that's kind of how I do it. Instead of the dumb, because the dumb da dumb confused me. So would that be another easier way?
Well, so if you look at this, that's what's happening here. So you have flowers and the day, right? So
Hmm.
flowers, strong week. If you were going to match that rhythm for the day, you would have it go the day instead of the day, right? So that's where songwriters get in trouble, is they stress unimportant words. So if you look at the line, the day keeps getting shorter, the doesn't carry any meaning. That's not a meaning carrying word. So you wouldn't stress that. So that's where you want to pay attention to how the words are spoken, not try to force them to fit a rhythm pattern. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you can do it the way that you're thinking, but just make sure that the that you're not saying it like the day keeps getting shorter, right?
Right.
And somebody just posted in the it would sound weird to sing flowers in the autumn sun, right? Like that's not how we speak. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining the shape
Natural.
of the language.
Okay. And what you mentioned about the what you were talking to Paul about, will that be on a PowerPoint that we could print?
I can post this in the community, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Chad,
Yeah.
I don't know how to raise my hand. Mike Deneen, I have a song, but some of the lyrics they sound the same, but they have more measures because of the phrasing. So it goes, I headed south to Harry's trailer. That's got 4 beats, and then it goes, I did my best Buffett impression. So they have the same melody, but one is 6 because of how you hold out the word. So should you add like a 6/4 measure, or should you just try to sing the line faster?
I mean, I think you could do it either way. You would just want to make sure that you're not changing the way that you're pronouncing the word, so you're pulling the emotion out of it.
Okay. Thanks.
You know, and that's the thing is you could set a similar rhythm line in different ways, but a lot of times it when we're writing in general, we're not thinking about this at all, right? And then we're playing this weird syllable game of how do I stretch my words, and then you're adding, you know, like you're kind of stretching and you're hurrying things. You know, you hear it a lot when you go to like open mics and people sing their songs, and you can tell when they haven't figured out their melody because they don't sing it the same way every time. And if you sing your song different every time you sing it, that's probably a good sign that your melody's not very strong. So that's
Okay.
something to think about for sure. Billy.
Yeah, when you first showed this, the first 2 lines, I think I could have done something with that. The third line really struck me as completely off. So it's almost like I would take the first 2 lines and I would remove the in the second line and just say days keep getting shorter or something like that.
You could. Yeah.
Because like you said, the day keeps getting shorter. That's one day. When winter comes, it's the days gradually keep getting shorter. So, but that was just my observation.
For sure. So what Billy was saying though is if there's a line that you like the rhythms, repeating those becomes part of the process, right? So repeating your rhythms and not being afraid of repetition. I think a lot of us as writers become really afraid of repeating because we're afraid we're going to be too repetitive. But most of us are so far from being repetitive that you're not going to cross that too much repetition line. And in fact, if you want to connect with more people, probably more repetition is your friend. So yesterday I came across a part of a video and they were talking about the song It's Too Late by Carole King. And it was written by, I'm going to forget her name. It's Tony something. But Tony and Carole wrote the song It's Too Late for Carole's album. And the lyrics, so one thing that people don't realize is Carole King was a lot of times more of a when she worked as a team with someone else, she was usually the music person. Someone else wrote the lyrics and then she wrote the music. And I just happened to come across this yesterday and I'm like, this totally fits with what we're talking about. And it talks about the importance of the lyric. Yeah, Tony Stern, there it is. I was gonna say Tony Byrne, but I got the wrong syllables there, so I was close. And then for some of you that's saying the days are getting shorter, yeah, that was not meant to be a real lyric. That was just to show rhythm. So like I said, that's what you would call a weak lyric. So let's watch this about Carole King, and I think you'll see how the rhythm of the lyric really helps the composition process, whether you're doing it yourself or if someone else is doing it. If it will play.
Premiered on the album Soon after moving to California, King reconnected with poet Toni Stern. She found the experience of working with a new lyricist freeing, as she discovered her own voice as a songwriter. King said, Toni's lyrics had an unmistakable meter. She expressed thoughts and emotions in a rhythm that pulsated under accented words. The lyrics she gave me always made the corresponding music flow into my brain and out of my voice and fingers. After years of interpreting Jerry's shouting suggestions and channeling his unique style of vocal expression to create the melody towards which he was leading me, I found Toni's more subtle form of guidance somewhat liberating. Her quiet way of suggesting a melody direction encouraged me to try her ideas and explore more of my own. Together, Stern and King wrote the alluring It's Too Late, which won a Grammy for Record of the Year in 1971. Stern also wrote the lyrics for the multi-generational fan favorite, Where You Lead.
So I thought that was interesting. And that video, it's on Produce Like a Pro. They do it's a whole documentary about Tapestry as an album. If you're interested, definitely go check that out. But I thought that was interesting to talk about how the lyric itself suggested the melody. And I think if you boil down what we're talking about today, is that a major part of your melody exists in the lyric before you even start to move over to an instrument. Because melody, remember, is half rhythm and half pitch, and your lyrics have half of that equation. So I also want to look at a song by Jason Isbell, and I want to listen to it, and and also read the lyrics, and I want you to see that Jason's song uses that concept of the lines that rhyme have a similar rhythm pattern. So the way that Jason has his verses set up is you have motif 1, that repeats, and then there's a second motif. And then it does it again, and it kind of repeats that same pattern. So it's AAB, AAB, or with the rhymes, it's AAB, CCB. So if we look at the lyric itself, his lyric is, we'll take the copper from the work site, meet me there at midnight, they ain't got a camera or a guard. Write my own prescription, if I can't get a fix, son, shit's about to get real hard. Molly don't believe me, she says she's gonna leave me, the kids won't even know my name. Put a gallon in the step side, with a little help by morning I won't feel no pain. So do you hear the rhythm in that lyric even before we listen at all? Compared to my section that I wrote, this feels like a song, whereas my lyric felt like a poem. Do you notice that? Like, there wasn't structure in mine. Melanie's given a thumbs up, Denise thumbs up. And I highlighted some lines. So, copper from the work site, da 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 dot dot. Meet me there at midnight. Write my own prescription. If I can't get a fix, son. Gallon in the step side, with a little help by. Do you see how there's repetition in rhythm in what Jason is writing? And Jason gets credited as being an awesome lyricist, which he is, but I also think Jason is a master in using melody. And I think the melody is why his lyrics connect with us the way that they do, because he's thinking about the vehicle for the lyric. Joe, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Popper from the work site, meet me there at midnight. But what about the words before Copper from the work site? How do they fit into the rhythm?
So that's kind of a little pickup. We'll take the copper from the work site, meet me there at midnight. They ain't got a camera or a guard. So sometimes there's words that are just extra, like, not stressed.
Yeah.
So they don't really necessarily fit into that rhythm. Once we listen to this, you'll see how that fits in. But the same thing's happening with they ain't got a camera or a guard. Shit's about to get real hard. Kids won't even know my name. Morning I won't feel no pain. So you have AAB, 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 AAB from a rhythm pattern perspective. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
How many of you make sure that your rhythms are happening like this before you start setting your lyric to music? So Susan says yes. Marquita too. So the meter is so important when we're writing lyric first. And the pattern of rhythm makes it so much easier to set to music because half of the equation is already there. You just have to find the notes. So let's listen to what Jason did and see if there's any other observations on how he built this song through repetition and through rhythmic structure. So this is King of Oklahoma. So do you see, or I guess I should ask, what are some of the things that you notice as you're listening, how the lyrical rhythm pertains to the melody, and are there any observations that you had from this song? Melanie said it's a simple formula that works and is easy to learn when playing. The more simple, the more catchy. Absolutely. The more simple means we can pay attention to what's being said. You know, the more complicated it is, it actually steals the spotlight from what you're trying to say. So for those of you who are very lyrical writers, the more simple your music can be, the more it puts the spotlight on the lyric. Susan said the change up on the verse with the bladder keeps the meter, but gives enough variety in the melodic pattern. Yep. Lindsay says, how does a line that changes from the rhythm fit with the other lines? So if you they're adding, so some of the places where the motif is almost the same but it's a little bit different, they're just adding some extra notes that still fit kind of the same pattern. So it's an embellishment of the motif. And then Paul says he hears that the rhythms change up on the chorus. Yeah, so I was going to point out, you know, she used to wake me up with coffee every morning is the same rhythm as she used to make me feel like the king of Oklahoma. It's very similar, right? And so are the lines, the other two lines. And you have this morning floor Oklahoma anymore. So you have an XAXA rhyme scheme, but the rhythm pattern is ABAB. So again, the rhyme scheme is fitting the rhyme scheme is the same as the rhythm pattern. And you see this over and over and over in songs. So you don't have to come up with a lot of melody in order to make an effective song. Each section kind of has an A line and a B line, and you just stack them in different ways. Billy.
Yeah, I was going to point out too that I heard the melody change in the chorus, but the melody in the verse is not. I've heard that 1,000 times. Da 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 da. You know, so that is I've heard that in other songs. So he's just reusing it.
Yeah. And most things have been done in some form or another. And it definitely, it works for sure. Anything else on this one? Bob says, can I explain my comments about the rhyme scheme versus the melodic scheme? Yes. So basically, your rhythms or your melody of the lines that rhyme are usually the same. So if a line rhymes with another line, it's usually the same melody. And if you are a person who writes melody first, your melody will tell you where the rhyme is because the rhyme comes from the repetition. So like sometimes I write melody first and then I write lyrics to my melody. The melody will tell me where the rhymes happen because rhyme is implied through rhythm. So the lines that rhyme usually have the same rhythm and they usually have the same melody. Now, there's no such thing as hard and fast rules, but that is one of the main patterns that you see in commercial music, definitely a lot, for sure. Any other thoughts on this before we jump back to my presentation? Awesome. So how do we pull this then into, how do you apply this to your own writing? Well, I think the easiest thing to do is to write a couple of lines of a section or write a section and determine what your rhyme scheme is. And then go back and look at the rhythms of those lines and edit and refine the lines so that the rhythm is the same in the lines that rhyme. So that means you'll probably have to edit your lyric. You'll have to come up with some different words. You'll want to pay attention to the rhythm pattern. So the more simple you can make that rhythm pattern, the easier this is. And then if you have melody first, if you're a person who maybe you write half the verse, if you write half the verse, then you already have a melody for the second half, then you can just write lyrics to that rhythm, right? So, and Susan says this actually helps you write stronger lyrics. Thinking of the rhythm pattern and thinking of this structure definitely will help you write a stronger song in general, because it will just be more refined. It will just, the structure will work in a better way. Lindsay says, how do longer lines fit with shorter ones? As far as that pattern, if you have a longer line leading to a shorter line, that usually creates a feeling of needing to move forward. If you have a shorter line moving to a longer line, that gives you a sense of spotlighting that second line, or kind of like slowing down a little bit and putting a spotlight on that second line. But the order of the length of lines doesn't necessarily matter. It's more about that rhythmic pattern. So to give an example of this concept of writing a couple of lines, if we go back to this great lyric that I wrote, and it probably should be the days keep getting shorter, but that would keep the same rhythm. The first two lines would determine the motif. So the dum da dum da da dum da dum da dum 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 da dum da. So flowers dry in the autumn sun, da 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 da. That would be the rhythm pattern that you would repeat in the next two lines for a 4-line section. So Lee asked a good question. What about songs that don't have much rhyme in the lyrics? Do the same rules apply? Short answer is it depends on what emotion you're trying to communicate. So if the reason why there's not a lot of rhyme is because there's not a lot of resolve or there's not a lot of stability, then you wouldn't necessarily want to match rhythms. But if you wanted the song to be more singable, more catchy, you would still want to have some form of melodic or rhythmic structure. Lindsay says there's a certain number of beats per measure. How does a longer line fit in the same measure as a shorter line? So in general, like a 4, it depends on the length of the notes, right? So if you have flowers dry in the autumn sun, that could be sung in 1 measure, or it would be more easily sung in 2 measures. But kind of the general rule is, if you're looking at the pattern, is about 4 stressed syllables fits nicely into 2 measures. So about 2 stressed syllables per measure. So that's why a lot of times songs have 8 bars for a section and 4 lines. Each line fits about 2 measures. And if your lines are too long, it doesn't sing very well. Does that make sense? Melanie said this is like question and answer concept coming up in motifs. Yes. you have your A, and then you have your B. And then you can determine the pattern that you put those in. So the thing to remember here is that people sing melodies. They don't, even though they're saying lyrics, what they're actually singing is a melody. So your structured melody allows your listener to actually focus on what's being said. So as I mentioned, repetition is your friend. As sections have rhyme schemes, they have melodic schemes. A lot of times those are the same. So great places to start from a structure perspective is once you have your motif, once you have your rhythm, you have your A and your B. You could do an A-A-B-B section. You could do an A-B-A-B section. You could do A-A-B-A, or you could do all the same rhythm as well, or you could maybe do an A-B-B-A too. So any other questions on that? Michael asks, how do stress syllables relate to drums? So the stress syllables in 4/4 time, you have a strong beat, a weak beat, a strong beat, a weak beat, strong beat, weak beat, strong beat, weak beat. So you could have any number of rhythm drum patterns under that, but you still in the time signature would have a strong, weak feel. So you would want to make sure that you are not putting unstressed syllables on strong beats. So having the word the on your downbeat usually makes it sound really weird. So you want to try to put stressed syllables on strong beats. Lee says, would listening to rap songs help with understanding rhythm and song lines? I think listening to any song that moves you will help, because I think you'll see that there's more structure than you realize. And most of the time that structure is simpler than what you may realize. It sounds more complicated than it is, if that makes sense. But good question. Teddy says, how does one factor or choose a chord progression in all of this? That's probably a different workshop, but chords have different sounds, which different sounds means different feeling, different mood. So it depends on the content of your lyric. So if you are shaping your lyrics for rhythm and melody, start with the sound. So this is where if you are kind of like writing melody first, right? Sometimes you come up with a little line and you hum it. So start by humming or playing a little melodic idea and get it in a structure before you even add words. So start to feel that rhythm, notice the natural shape, the natural phrasing, the accents, the spaces, and then you choose words that match the melody's rhythm and contour. So you want to make sure that you're not misstressing words. You want to adjust the syllables and the stresses until the lyric and the melody feel inseparable. And you don't want to be, like I said, misstressing things so you're putting the wrong emphasis or the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, right? And that's something that becomes really easy to do when you're, excuse me, writing melody first. So that's kind of what I have for this overall. Again, if you find any value in this, you can use this link to tip, but let's talk about what we've been talking about and how do you see this applying to what you've been doing? Is this helpful? Does this get you thinking in a different way? I think one of the things that a lot of lyric writers that you don't necessarily think about is how does it flow rhythmically? And that's what I really want you to start thinking about. So what are your thoughts on this? Thumbs up from Jeanette. Billy.
I've done ever since your co-writing last challenge in the spring. I've done quite a bit of co-writing with some folks from this group and some from some others. And what I try to do, and I'm a lyrics first writer, is I'll try to write a story and then I'll I'll try to sing it to myself and play along with some chords, and then it has to be revised. But even then, when I hand it off to someone else, I don't usually give them my ideas. And the stuff I did with Shay, because he's a 80s rocker, it came out with that Def Leppard feel, and that's had absolutely nowhere what I was thinking, but it came out good. So I find that interesting. But it has to be like you have to get them, some type of melody has to fit, even if he ends up turning it into something completely different, but he didn't have to change that many words. He changed a few here and there, but that was just a comment from this year.
Yeah, and think of like songwriting duos like Bernie Taupin and Elton John, right? Like it's been said that Bernie would refine his lyrics so they would have a rhythm that Elton could just kind of run with and not necessarily change it a whole lot. Um, so the more you think about and what you said is interesting, Billy, because sometimes when you work with someone, you're like, cool, like put your spin on it, whatever works. But sometimes you have a vision of what you're going for. And I think the more structured you can make your lyric, the more the composer, whoever that is, can then build on what you're already thinking or what you're already doing, right? So I think it makes for a stronger song in general. Susan, how about you?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for all these workshops. I've appreciated them. For me, the writing lyrics part and the editing, I mean, I'm a writer anyway, and I have no trouble with like wanting to dig in there and write. Stephen King said something like, write and don't be afraid to write it all over again or tear it all up or whatever he said. I don't know. But, a lot of times we have these like precious little lines that we don't want to change or whatever. So I think I already have that as an innate, and I also have a really good feel for the lyrics. So it's not really that part that's my problem, but and even making a melody isn't my problem. But I mean, you have made me realize just even today, what I do is I write a lyric. I've had a co-writers, and my latest one moved off to New York and doesn't want to write anymore. But so I've been struggling with, feeling that, taking my lyrics to music. And, I think what I learned today was that I personally jump to the chords. I jump from my lyric to how am I going to, release this, or how am I going to put together, all of the production part of it. I mean, production I can do too, but it's just like, I can barely play the piano. I can barely play the guitar. I can play enough of that for myself a little bit, but I just realized that, but I can do what you said. And this is so great. Take the, just put melody, go melody. What melody goes with this, and just sing it or something. And I mean, that's so breathtakingly cool. So thank you, Chad. I mean, I don't have to worry about step 3 when I'm not to step 3 yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a confidence thing. Anyway, so thank you.
Well, I love that you said that too, because I was thinking about that as I was preparing this. Is even myself, I think sometimes we look at the song as a whole and we don't step back and say like, okay, what am I just doing rhythmically line by line? And are there things that I'm doing that are actually hurting me when I do get to those next steps? Right. So I love that you said that, because I think it's more of a, let's not conquer everything at once. Let's just see, is this flowing in a good way, or does this flow how I want it to? Because maybe it's just, it doesn't flow right. So yeah. Awesome. Anybody else have thoughts? Dave.
Thanks, Chad. This has been very helpful. I think one tool that's been helpful for me in this regard is like, Susan, you mentioned the perfect line or something, is singing it or writing the song, setting it aside for a few weeks, and then coming back with fresh ears, because that's when you'll start hearing things stick out that's what I've found with my music. It's like I had a song that I thought was really strong, and then I came back to it. I'm like, this thing needs to be reshaped for prosody. So, and then I threw in the chat here, just and Chad, I think you mentioned this before, is like taking an existing song. I think it was Billy that said, he'd heard that melody before. Well, write new lyrics to it, because that's going to help tune your ear as well. Then you can compare the recorded version of somebody else to what you're doing and see if the emphasis matches up and those things. So, but this has been really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a good tip, Dave, is take an existing song and try to write a matching verse to what's already there. So like take a song that you're really familiar with and don't necessarily sing it the way that they sing it, but pay attention to the lyrical rhythm and see if you can match that. And it's not that you want to necessarily use that in a song. You totally could. You would just want to have it sound different, but the key is to train yourself to do the skill, right? So like Dave said, that's a practice in writing to rhythm. And start simple. Just start with really simple rhythm patterns and then build from there, because writing to rhythm is a skill that helps songwriters a lot, for sure. Billy.
Yeah. Along those lines of rewriting a song to a rhythm, Beth Nielsen Chapman said, take your favorite Beatles song and rewrite the second verse. Is an exercise that she does to kind of stimulate her thought process.
Exactly, for sure. Any other thoughts on this while we're still together? Awesome. I just saw clarinet songwriting. Was that from Jerry? Yep, that's Jerry, I figured. Marquita.
Could you put the buy me a cup of coffee in the chat to where we can copy and paste?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll make it easy for you to send me money. That works for me. But no, hopefully this gives you something to think about, right? Because I think this is something that's important no matter what style you write. I think it's also important no matter what kind of your goal is from a lyric perspective. I think the melody and the rhythm is really the vehicle that delivers what you're saying. And I think the more thoughtful you can be with that, the more people can pay attention to what you're saying. And I think as writers, that's what we all want, is someone to actually pay attention to what we're saying. And the rhythm doesn't have to be complicated. The melody doesn't have to be complicated. So yeah. Melanie says, looking at the website, I have paid courses. At one time, I did have a monthly membership, but I did wrap that up for now, Melody. So I don't have that. But my plan is to do these free workshops once a month. So we'll still have a chance to get together. And then there will be some other premium workshops and different things probably coming next year. But for now, it's the YouTube channel, the community, and then these workshops. Awesome. Well, everybody, thanks for hanging out here. Hopefully this gives you some things to think about. I will be posting this in the online community shortly. And then, the next workshop is coming up December 13th. And I'm going to do a workshop on how to find your hook. So when you're writing lyrics and finding kind of what is the center of your song and what makes your song or what can you build your song around. So great to see everybody. I'll see all of you soon and have a great weekend. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Chad. Have a good one.